Welcome back to the Olympus Report, Demigods, Monsters, and Gods Alike. Let's check back in with the Kane siblings. Here's everything you need to know about the Kane Chronicles Book 2, The Throne of Fire. Before we jump into Book 2, here's a bit of a refresher. Carter and Sadie Kane are Egyptian magicians. Anyone can be a magician, but it helps if you have the blood of the pharaoh. Carter and Sadie stopped the god Set from destroying the world and stopped Apophis, the embodiment of chaos, from escaping the Duat, the world that lies beneath the mortal world, the world of the gods. The Path of the Gods is a form of magic that was forbidden by the House of Life. The House of Life is in charge of all Egyptian magicians. They banned the Path of the Gods for fear of the gods taking control. However, Carter and Sadie seek to stop this. They're now seeking new magicians to teach the Path of the Gods to. Alright, let's jump into book number 2. The book begins with Carter, Sadie, Khufu, and their new trainees, Jazz and Walt, sneaking into the Brooklyn Museum to borrow an Egyptian artifact. However, instead of the museum being closed and empty, like Sadie had said, there's a full-on wedding happening inside. Carter and Sadie, like always, argue about the best way to steal the artifact, which happens to be a statue. They can't come back tomorrow because the artifact is being shipped out. Sadie yells at Carter, saying he didn't give them enough time to plan, and Carter agrees, but he only found out they needed the artifact yesterday as Horus came to him in his dreams and told him. And they definitely need it, as Horus said this statue may be key in saving the world. Sadie decides they'll just stick to the original plan, and they will just have to create a diversion when the time comes. Carter and Sadie drop through a domed roof and land on the 3rd floor. They tell Khufu to wait on the roof for them. They then set out to meet up with Walt and Jazz, who they already sent through a side window. They find them inside and see they've already disabled the mortal security. When they get closer, it seems that Walt and Jazz are having a serious discussion, and Jazz is holding Walt's hand, saying it will be okay. They'll figure it out. Sadie is not too happy about this development, as she may have a crush on Walt. Carter and Sadie interrupt them, and Jazz drops Walt's hand. Carter asks what they're talking about, and they say the Book of Ra, of course. But Carter and Sadie know they're lying, but decide to save that conversation for another time. They need to head into the exhibit. They head into the exhibit. They find the statue they need, a statue of the god Khnum. Horus had told Carter that this statue held the secrets to the Book of Ra. Khnum was one of 3 aspects of Ra's form, the form he took on his trip into the underworld. But how do they get the statue back to Brooklyn House? Walt then points to the statue. It's wearing an amulet with the symbol of rebirth. Walt says maybe they don't need the statue, maybe they just need the amulet. Sadie says Walt is a genius and goes to grab it. Carter yells no, it could be a trap. But Sadie doesn't listen. She grabs the amulet and the statue's head opens, revealing a scroll. Sadie grabs it, and when she does, the room starts to shake and the scroll catches fire. But it doesn't burn up. In fact, it's not even hot. Instead, it lights up the room, setting it on fire and activating what Carter figures is a bunch of protection spells. They then hear a screech, and from the fire steps a griffin, twice the size of a lion. Its eyes flick to Sadie. Carter tells Sadie to drop the scroll, but she can't. It's stuck to her hand. Carter reaches into the Duat and draws his sword. Sadie, with the hand not glued to the scroll, summons her staff. Carter tells Walt to check the windows, look for an escape route. And then the griffin lunges. Sadie throws her staff and it transforms into a tiger. However, the griffin snaps it in 2 easily. Carter does his best to deflect the griffin with his sword. Carter calls to Walt and asks how it's going with the windows. Walt says he almost has it, but Jazz yells to stop. The window is covered in symbols of Skekmet. Walt, however, opens the window and white fire engulfs the room, knocking Walt back, and the griffin now has its eyes set on Jazz. But it isn't aiming for Jazz, it's aiming for the window, attempting to fight the fire. Carter yells to the griffin to stop, and surprisingly it does. Then Carter sees human shapes forming in the fire. The fire has also infiltrated Walt's body, and Jazz is attempting to cast a healing spell on him. Carter tries to process all this new information and figure out a plan. Carter realizes the griffin was just a coincidence. It's not what's protecting the room. The griffin takes off after the fiery shapes, and Sadie goes to cast a spell on it. Carter yells at her to stop, but it's too late. She sends a rope after the Griffin. Then suddenly Jazz collapses. Carter tells Sadie to help her and takes off after the Griffin. And just when you think things can't get worse, all the commotion draws the attention of the partygoers. Carter takes off and tells Sadie to follow when she can. He thinks he might be able to control the Griffin. The party is absolute chaos, and Carter knows he has to do something or a lot of innocent people will get hurt. The Griffin consumes one of the fire people, but then Sadie's rope finally takes effect and the Griffin crashes into the food table. Carter approaches it and it screams, "Freak!" Carter tells it he can help. The Griffin lets Carter come closer. Carter remembers the Griffin is the sacred animal of Horus, and that's probably why this Griffin is obeying him. Sadie then catches up with a barely conscious Walt and Jazz. Walt tells Carter the fire people are sickness demons, and Jazz nearly died trying to get it out of Walt. Jazz calls them the 7 arrows of Skepmek's plague. Spirits, but Jazz can stop them. Walt says no, she needs to rest, but Jazz says the partygoers will die if she doesn't do something. She can channel Skepmek and force them back into the Duat. It's what she's trained for. Jazz then grabs something from her bag, kisses Walt on the cheek, and runs to the center of the ballroom. She draws a circle on the floor and produces a statue of Skepmek. Jazz starts chanting, and red tendrils appear swirling around the room, drawing the spirits in. But just when they think it might work, something goes wrong, and the spell becomes sluggish. And then Carter hears a voice tell him it won't work, and when he turns, one of the spirits is speaking to him. The spirit tells him chaos is too powerful to give up, and then it tells Carter something else. He should also give up on his quest to save her. He'll never find her. She sleeps in the place of the red sands. Carter knows the spirit is talking about Zia, the real Zia, who Carter has been desperately searching for. Carter says the spirit is deceiving him, and the spirit laughs, saying Carter should know better. Besides, they've met once before. Carter then pulls out his Eye of Horus amulet, and the spirit hisses and shrinks back. Then Jazz's spell once again picks back up. And only Carter seems to have been able to hear the spirit, or even perceive the slowdown in time that just happened. Walt, a specialist in magical items, while all of this was happening, summoned a boat from an amulet. Carter then works on hooking the Griffin up to it. Just then the spell fades. It worked, but Jazz faints. They grab her quickly and put her in the boat. They hear Khufu above them. He's opened the dome roof. And they take off. The Griffin screams, "Freak!" and they fly off into the night. The Griffin seemingly knowing the right way to go. The scroll, still stuck to Sadie's hand, glows with fire. And Carter wonders what exactly it is that they just stole. They get back to Brooklyn House and everybody swarms Sadie and her flaming scroll hand. She insists that she's okay and that they should take care of Jazz first, as she seems to be in some type of coma. Walt carries her to a stretcher and Sadie pretends not to be bothered by this. Sadie turns away and sits down. She then pulls out a healing statue that Jazz gave to her recently and had told her that she would need this soon for Carter. But Sadie wonders, how would Jazz know that? And then a woman asks if Sadie's okay. Sadie puts the statue away and turns to see Bast. Sadie says she's fine, except for her still flaming hand. Bast says she may be able to help with that. Bast begins to chant and soon the flames sputter out and the scroll drops into Sadie's lap. Sadie says thank you and Bast says no problem. Can't have the power of Ra running amok. Sadie asks what she means. Is this scroll the actual book of Ra? Bast says it's part of the book. Bast tells Sadie to be careful. If she insists on awakening Ra, the next fires awakened may not be as harmless. Sadie questions Bast. Isn't Ra the pharaoh? Does she not want him awakened? Bast doesn't answer and says they will talk in the morning. The scroll should only be opened in daylight. Bast tells Sadie to get some sleep. She's got a big day tomorrow. Sadie turns and sees Walt is still with Jazz. She grumbles and says Bast is right. She's not needed here and heads up to her bedroom. She prepares for tomorrow. She'll be traveling to England to see her grandparents and old friends for her birthday. Sadie opens her closet door to see a picture of Anubis, who she may also still have a crush on, as ridiculous as it is to have a crush on a god. However, Anubis hasn't spoken to Sadie since the whole red pyramid fiasco, and Sadie thought maybe she could get over Anubis with Walt, but that's not going so great either. Sadie decides to get some sleep. Unfortunately, things only get worse from there. Sadie now in bird form with a human head. Since releasing Isis, Sadie is no longer able to change the form of her Ba, so she's stuck with what she calls chicken form. Finds herself in the headquarters of the House of Life. Sadie sees the new chief lector, Disjardin, pacing the Hall of Ages as if waiting for something. Disjardin then says something. At first, Sadie thinks he's talking to her, but then from the shadows steps a man, who Sadie describes as an evil ice cream parlor man. The man looks as if he was burned with acid and then clawed at by cats. Disjardin calls him Vladimir. Vladimir tells Disjardin they must move, kill Amos. The Kane children have found the scroll, and they can't let them find the other two. Vladimir can deal with them. Disjardin says no, he is the chief lector and he will handle it. Besides, their first priority should be to stop Apophis from escaping, and perhaps the Kane children can help with that. Vladimir scoffs. It's the children that have upset Mott. They will only help chaos. Disjardin says perhaps he is right, but for now he must think on it. Vladimir says as you wish. But what about the other scrolls? Disjardin says he may protect them as he sees fit. Besides, one is out of reach anyway. Sadie wakes up to her uncle Amos wishing her a happy birthday. He's just returned from his trip to the first known Egypt. Sadie tries to explain what happened in her dream, and Amos says, not now. Let's go meet up with the rest of the 21st gnome for breakfast. Sadie gets ready for the day, hoping she's still able to go to London. She stores her things in the Duat, including the Carter statue, and then meets everyone on the veranda, including the younger trainees, Felix, Julian, Alyssa, and others. Something all these trainees have in common, like Carter and Sadie, is all of them are blood of the pharaohs. However, Jazz is not there and according to Amos, is still in a coma. After breakfast, Sadie explains her dream and naturally this scares everyone, especially the younger trainees. But Amos assures everyone that they are safe, especially with Carter and Sadie to protect them. And Amos says he could take Disjardin. But it seems strange that the chief lector would agree to Vladimir's plan. Sadie asks who Vladimir is, and Amos says Vladimir Menshkanov, the second most powerful magician in the world, and that his speciality is killing other magicians. It seems Disjardin knows Apophis is the true enemy. Amos says they shouldn't worry too much about it, instead focus on the plan. Carter then explains their plan to wake Ra. Ra was the first and most powerful king. He would ride the Duat every night and be born again with the sun. But he went senile and has been missing for millennia. But Carter still believes he's alive, and he's somewhere in the Duat, and the Book of Ra would tell them how to find him. Carter then explains that Apophis will escape in 4 days, and they need Ra to stop Apophis from swallowing the sun and plunging the world into chaos and darkness. Sadie can tell Carter is leaving something out, but Carter gives her a look to drop it. They'll talk about it later. Felix asks why 4 days, and Bast explains that's the spring equinox, a powerful time for magic where Mott and chaos will align, but it will also be the perfect time to awaken Ra. And hopefully they can convince Disjardin that they are on the same side. Right now they have 1 scroll of Ra, but they need 2 others. 1 for each aspect of Ra, morning, noon, and night. Amos says it will not be easy. 1 scroll was lost eons ago, and the other is in possession of the House of Life with Vladimir. Boss says she'll travel into the Duat to check on Apophis's prison and see if there's any way she can slow down his escape. But Boss won't leave them defenseless. She's asked a friend to come from the Duat to protect Carter and Sadie. He should arrive tomorrow. Carter says he'll pack. He and Sadie can leave in the morning, but Sadie says no, it's her birthday and she wants to go to England to see her friends. And surprisingly, Amos agrees. Carter is stunned, speechless. Amos says it's okay, it will give them time to plan. Carter looks at Sadie angrily and then storms away. Sadie prepares to go, but first she visits Jazz, which makes her feel quite guilty. Jazz risked her life for them, and what was Sadie doing? Maybe Carter was right to be angry with her. Sadie then sees Carter feeding some turkeys to the Griffin, who has taken up to living on the roof of Brooklyn House, and Carter has named him Freak. Sadie walks over to Carter, and Carter doesn't seem angry anymore. He tells Sadie to be safe, and when she gets back, he has a birthday gift for her. Carter then tells Sadie that one of the spirits talked to him last night at the museum, and that it said if he didn't find Zia soon, she would die. Sadie asks if the spirit mentioned Zia by name, and Carter says, well, no. Sadie then asks Carter what he was keeping from her at breakfast, and Carter won't say. Now, both irritated with each other, again bid each other farewell and part ways. Sadie then opens a portal and goes through it. She exits near Cleopatra's Needle in London, and 30 minutes later she's at her grandparents' apartment. But when she knocks on the door, no one answers. She figures they want to surprise her, so she grabs the spare key and opens the door. Sadie first notices that the living room is dark. In fact, the place is quiet. Sadie pulls out her phone to call her friends, but it's dead. Then the front door slams shut, and a voice definitely not belonging to her parents hisses from the stairway. "Welcome home, Sadie." But first, before we find out who that is, let's check back in with Carter. Carter thinks about the vision he had last night. He wanted to tell Sadie, but he didn't want to worry her any more than he already had on her birthday. When Carter went to sleep last night, he had a dream, but not bot travel. He woke up in another body, the body of Horus. And he's on a boat, a very worn boat, the boat of Ra, and it's traveling through the Duat. Horus greets him in his head and tells Carter that he must show him something. Horus shows Carter the path that Ra would take every night, and Carter sees horrible things. And he's sure if he had just been Carter, he would have gone insane. Carter sees a shore covered in scarab beetles, the symbol of Ra's rebirth. And beneath the surface, Apophis strains to break free. Carter then sees a serpent's eye, the eye of Apophis. Horus tells Carter Apophis will indeed break out in 4 days, and the only way to stop him is to once again become one. Ra, like his boat, is weak and fragile. He won't be able to do anything if he's awakened. And the other gods agree, but it must be Carter's choice. Horus will support Carter no matter what he decides. Carter had then woken up, but he didn't tell Sadie or anyone else the specifics of his dream. We now catch up to the present, and Carter is still on the roof feeding turkeys to Freak. But he decides to go about his day as normal as possible, as not to scare the trainees any further, which includes teaching Magic Problem Solving 101. The class consisted of Walt, Felix, Alyssa, and Julian. Carter summons 4 statues for them to fight and defeat. Felix goes to summon a spell, and Carter says no penguins. A very upset Felix stops his spell. Alyssa writes the hieroglyph for miss on hers, and the statue keeps missing its attacks until it hits a wall and shatters. Felix throws a basketball at his and then stomps on the statue until it also shatters. He looks up at Carter and says, "You didn't say we had to use magic." Walt, a magical item specialist, goes through his items, but before he can get one, he trips, and the statue comes to attack him, and Walt blocks the sword with his hand. And when Walt touches the statue, it crumbles, turns gray, and then disintegrates into dust. Carter looks at Walt. That was super impressive, but when Carter sees the look in his eyes, he knows Walt did not do that on purpose and has no idea what just happened. But before they can figure it out, the room shakes. They all turn their attention to the statue of Ra that crumbles, and from the statue emerges empty scarab shells and a cobra with 3 serpent heads. The snake hisses for Carter to give him the scroll or it will kill the girl, just as he destroyed her village. Carter tries to summon his sword, but his arms shake. Carter then snaps out of his fear and tells all the others to attack. They do and manage to destroy the serpent. Felix, who looks terrified, asks if that was part of the test. Carter lies and says yes. But the look Walt gives him lets Carter know he doesn't believe that. But before he talks to Walt, first he needs to find Amos. Carter finds his uncle and explains what happened. Amos examines the scarab shells in the library and burns them with a spell. Amos explains snakes in Egyptian mythology can be good and bad. Some are enemies of Ra, but some are also protectors. Carter doesn't think this one was a protector. The voice it spoke to him in sounded like the one of Set's minion, the one that worked for Apophis, face of horror. Carter thinks it was Apophis sending them a message. Amos says he'll strengthen the protections on the house. This shouldn't happen again. Carter asks Amos what if they're wrong? What if they shouldn't awaken Ra? Amos smiles at Carter and reminds him of all he and Sadie have accomplished. They've revived a long-forgotten form of magic, they've trained new magicians in it, and they've battled gods. Carter needs to trust his instincts, but it will be challenging, and Carter should be prepared. Amos's research class then arrives and he takes his leave. Carter goes back to his room and goes to the balcony. Carter thinks and decides he has absolutely no idea what he's doing. Everyone looks up to him, but what if he ends up getting himself and everyone else killed? Carter then thinks of Zia and walks over to a scrying ball Walt made for him. A bowl filled with olive oil that allows you to see other people and places with a proper spell. Carter has tried using it to find Zia but has had no luck. Carter is then interrupted by Walt, who asks Carter what he thinks the three-headed snake meant, so Carter explains the conversation he had with Amos. Carter then asks Walt how he turned his training dummy to dust, and Walt says he honestly doesn't know. Carter asks if whatever this new ability is has to do with what he and Jazz were talking about in the museum. Walt says things are complicated for him. Carter says if there's anything he can do, he wants to help. But Walt doesn't answer. They're then interrupted by the scrying bowl. It shows Carter an image of his and Sadie's grandparents' apartment in London completely destroyed. Carter asks the bowl to show him Sadie, and when he does, the bowl goes up in flames. Walt pulls him away. Carter turns to Walt and says they need to get to London now. So let's jump back to Sadie and see what exactly destroyed the apartment. Sadie is greeted by the mysterious voice. Sadie attempts to retrieve her staff from the Duat, but she's not good at opening the Duat, especially on short notice and under pressure. She debates running, but what if her grandparents need help? The figure then walks down the stairs. It wears a fluffy black dress and looks to be very old. But the woman isn't all human. She has bird talons and a beak, and Sadie says she smells like death and decay. Sadie demands to know who she is and where her grandparents are. The bird woman says, "Don't you recognize me?" and her image flickers, and Sadie sees her grandmother. The image flickers back to the bird lady, and she explains that Sadie's whole family is blood of the pharaohs, making them the perfect hosts for gods. Sadie demands she leave her grandmother's body, but the god says she can't do that. Not all of the gods support Carter and Sadie. They don't believe they're strong enough, and they don't want Ra revived. And the bird lady only protects the strong. Sadie then remembers who this is, the vulture goddess Nekbet. However, at first Sadie calls the goddess Neckbutt, which rightly angers the goddess and says that Sadie needs to die. But the attack never comes. Vultures don't kill their prey, they wait for their prey to die. Sadie says that's not gonna happen. Sadie then hears a crash from upstairs and hears her grandfather's scream. Nekbet says good, Babi is waking. He will make quick work of Sadie. Sadie does not stay around and bolts out the door. On the sidewalk, Sadie runs into her two friends Liz and Emma, who Sadie grabs and runs the other way, telling them to hurry. They make it further down the road. When her friends ask Sadie what is going on, Sadie looks back and gets her first look at Babi, who is a giant baboon with glistening fangs. The monster starts ripping up street signs and turning over cars. Emma asks what is that, and Sadie says Babi, god of baboons. And he's taken over her grandfather and wants to kill them. Emma and Liz surprisingly figure Sadie is joking. Nekbet then joins Babi. Sadie says no, not kidding, in fact there are two gods, so they can run now. Liz and Emma nod and take off. They weave the streets of London until they come to a church. Sadie hears someone call her name and turns to see Anubis in an attached graveyard. Much like Sadie, Liz and Emma are struck speechless by the very attractive god. Anubis tells her to come into the graveyard. They need to talk, so Sadie enters. She tells Liz and Emma to wait by the gate. Anubis tells Sadie she needs to go to the 18th Nome, Russia. That's where Vladimir has the second part of the Book of Ra. It's on his bedside table. Of course, it's a trap, but they really don't have much of a choice. And she should go there now before his defenses get stronger. Sadie says she has bigger problems at the moment. Anubis says unfortunately he can't help. He doesn't have a physical body and he can only appear in places of death. Sadie will have to face Nekbet and Babi on her own. Sadie very sarcastically thanks him for all his help and asks if there's anything else before she goes and gets herself killed. Anubis hands Sadie a tiny knife, and Sadie remarks what is she supposed to do with that? Give Babi a shave? Anubis says it's not for Nekbet or Babi. She will need it later. It's used for the ceremony of opening the mouth. Sadie says if she survives the day, she'll try and remember that. Anubis tells Sadie to take the underground or stay near water. They won't be able to track her. If Sadie can make it to the Thames Bridge, her driver will be waiting there to pick her up. Anubis says she has to go now. He's sorry he can't do more. He then wishes Sadie a happy birthday and kisses her. Anubis then fades away, and Sadie is paralyzed with shock. Liz and Emma then grab her and tell her to move. Babi and Neckbeck have caught up. Sadie flees for her life, but has a smile on her face while doing it. They then flee into the London Underground and catch a train, which gives Sadie a time to catch her breath and concentrate. She's able to retrieve her supplies from the Duat, and Liz and Emma gasp. What the heck is happening? So Sadie explains everything about magic and the Egyptian world. And surprisingly, her friends believe her. And Sadie can't help but think just how much she's missed her friends. The train then stops and they get off, but they've overshot the bridge. They hear a roar. Sadie says they will have to make it to the Waterloo Bridge. But Liz says that's half a mile away. They will never make it. So Sadie says they will have to stay and fight. And then brings out her staff. They head for an exit when the wall explodes behind them and Babi emerges from the rubble. The commuters scream and rush out of the underground, but Neckbet and Babi aren't interested in them. They're only interested in Sadie. Neckbet taunts Sadie, saying she is unworthy for running. Babi roars and an army of baboons emerge. Sadie reaches into her bags in hope of finding something to help her. She pulls out a small, tiny bottle. A potion, her first attempt at one. If it's done right, it will allow Sadie to use great deals of magic without burning up. But Sadie hasn't had the time to test it. She figures now is as good a time as ever and swallows it in one gulp. Sadie feels the magic burn through her. She casts a spell and gold light emanates from her body, and everything in the subway station starts to come alive. Cups, hoodies, newspaper, mannequins, and more, and they all swarm the baboons. Sadie turns to her friends and says, "Run, they gotta get out of here now." They make it to the surface once again. Sadie looks for a taxi, but there are none, and she thinks they're gonna have to run all the way to the bridge. Then Sadie spots a short, scruffy, very ugly-looking man in front of a black car holding a sign that says Kane. Sadie figures she's out of options, so she approaches the man. He says, "About time." He's Boss's friend, and asks if she's Sadie. Sadie says that depends. She currently has 2 gods chasing her. The man says, "You'll want a bridge then." He turns to the limo and says, "Get in." And Sadie can't help but notice what a mess it is. She finds a card on the floor and it reads, "Driver, Bess." Sadie asks the man, "Is he Bess?" And he says, "Yep, that's him, Bess, god of dwarves." Bess takes them to the middle of Waterloo Bridge. Bess says they will have to fight here. Sadie turns and sees Neckbet and Babi storming the bridge, flipping cars. Sadie takes a big breath and tells Liz and Emma they're getting out and to do what she says. Bess asks if she needs help, and Sadie says yes. Bess tells her to get out and says he'll be right there. First, he needs to change into his ugly outfit. They get out and Sadie hands Liz and Emma 4 statues and tells them to put them north, south, east, and west. She also then hands them chalk and tells them to draw a circle. Sadie then raises her staff, and when she slams it into the ground, the circle starts to glow. A protective circle. Babi attacks the circle, and Sadie sees black, but the gods don't pierce the protection. Sadie tells Liz and Emma that no matter what happens, to stay in the circle. Sadie steps up to face Babi, feeling like she's about to burn up from overusing her magic. Neckbet orders Babi to attack, but before he can, the limo door bursts open and Bess emerges. Neckbet screeches and covers her eyes, and when Sadie turns around, she knows why. Bess is standing there in just his underwear. Bess leaps in front of the circle and circles Babi. Bess breathes on the baboon, and the stench is so bad that Babi is forced back into the Duat and leaves Sadie's grandpa laying on the pavement. Bess then jumps in front of Neckbet and screams, "Boo!" With a face so horrible, it also shocks Neckbet back into the Duat, leaving Sadie's grandmother behind. Sadie tells Bess thank you, but to please put some clothes on. Bess laughs and says, "You're alright, Sadie Kane. I can see why Boss likes you." Sadie then goes to check on her grandparents to make sure they're okay. Bess says they need to leave now before the police show up. Sadie goes to bring her grandparents to the car, but Bess says no, they can't come. They're mortal, they don't belong on this quest, and if she wants to find the second scroll of Ra, they need to leave now. Sadie hesitates, but her friends and grandparents tell her it's okay, they'll be alright. So Sadie reluctantly leaves them behind and gets in the car. But they don't make it very far. Standing in front of the car is Walt and Carter, demanding that Bess release Sadie. Bess asks if he should scare them, and Sadie says no, she'll handle this one. She gets out of the car and greets them and says they have perfect timing. Carter is confused and asks if she's in trouble, and Sadie says no, not anymore. Bess is Bast's friend and their driver. Sadie tells them to get in. They're going to Russia. On the ride over, Sadie shows Carter the knife from Anubis. Carter recognizes the blade but doesn't know what they could possibly need it for. Bess takes them to a park, and on top of a hill is a staircase with 2 sphinxes on each side. They can use them to open a portal to Russia. But before they can, Bess tells Walt to leave. Sadie asks why, and Bess asks Walt why he hasn't told them. Sadie asks what Bess means, but Walt dodges the subject. Walt then brings up Jazz and says he better get back to her anyway, and this makes Sadie angry. So then Sadie brings up Anubis, and Walt looks like he got punched in the gut. Seems like we have a very complicated love triangle square on our hands. Walt agrees to leave, but before he goes, he gifts Sadie with an amulet for her birthday. On it is a hoop, a symbol of Ra, for eternity. He hopes it will bring her good luck. Walt then tells Sadie he doesn't want to leave. If she needs help, to call him. Walt then exits the car, and Sadie feels pretty bad for snapping. Bess then drives up the staircase, and at the last second, a portal opens and they drive through. Bess takes them to a museum in Russia. However, Russian museums aren't exactly welcoming. The 18th gnome is hidden inside. Carter and Sadie will have to break in and find the entrance. Bess is unable to enter, so they will be on their own. Bess will meet them at the Chocolate Museum once they succeed. So Sadie clarifies they need to sneak into a highly guarded Russian museum, find a secret passageway, steal a magical scroll, all while not getting captured or killed, and Bess gets to eat chocolate. Bess says, yep, that about sums it up. Sadie says he better bring her a takeaway bag, and then her and Carter exit and head towards the museum. Getting into the museum was surprisingly easy. It wasn't guarded against magic, so with a quick trip into the Duat, they were able to enter. Carter speaks the spell for hide, and him and Sadie are doused in shadow-like clouds, essentially turning them invisible. Sadie spots a stone, and on it is Anubis. Carter then blurts out that Walt likes her. Whatever he's going through, it has nothing to do with Sadie. And besides, Anubis is a god. At this, Sadie goes red and says Carter has no idea what he's talking about. Besides, she wasn't looking at the stone because of Anubis. The stone has a frame around it, almost as if it was a door. Sadie speaks the spell for open, and a doorway appears. Sadie gestures towards it and says, after you, brother. They enter and then exit through a mirror on top of a fireplace in a room, and on the other side is the magician Vladimir casting a spell with his back to them. There's a green vase and a demon in pain. Sadie and Carter then spot the desk that Anubis said the scroll would be in. They very slowly creep towards it, hoping the invisibility spell will hold. Vladimir finishes his spell and apologizes to the demon. Unfortunately, he will need to sacrifice him to summon such a major god. This confuses Carter and Sadie. What does he mean? The House of Life doesn't allow the summoning of gods. Vladimir continues the summoning spell. The demon dissolves and a hieroglyph glows on the summoning circle. And then a voice speaks from inside the green vase, telling Vladimir it's been a long time. Sadie almost screams and Carter covers her mouth. They both instantly recognize the voice. It's the voice of Set. Carter whispers, scroll, then leave now. Sadie pulls supplies from her bag, for once not arguing with her brother. Sadie does her best to get the desk open. Set's voice once again speaks from the jar. It seems he's trapped in there. Set says it would be easier to speak face to face. Vladimir says no, and to answer his questions. Vladimir demands to know the binding for Apophis, and how to penetrate the defenses of Brooklyn House. Once he can destroy him, there will be no one left to oppose him. This time it's Sadie who covers Carter's mouth. Vladimir wants to free Apophis and kill Amos. Sadie says to Carter, help me get the scroll now so they can get out of here. Set then laughs and tells Vladimir, what would Disjardin think? Vladimir tells him to watch his threats, evil day. Sadie gasps. Vladimir knows Set's secret name, which gives you absolute power over someone. Vladimir tells Set that Apophis will rise with or without his help, but if Set helps, he will be rewarded. And if he doesn't cooperate, Set will be exorcised painfully. Set agrees and then starts listing ingredients used for Apophis's binding. Sadie makes a shop tea to test the desk for traps, but it appears there are none. So Sadie opens the drawer and slips the scroll into her bag. As Set comes to the end of his list, he says there's one last thing you need, a sacrifice. Maybe a magician who can't do an invisibility spell correctly. Vladimir then turns towards Carter and Sadie, and the invisibility spell fades entirely. Sadie accuses Vladimir of being on the wrong side, and Vladimir laughs. This is how it's supposed to be. Apophis is supposed to swallow the sun and plunge the world into darkness. It's what was prophesized, and it's pointless to fight against it. Set then speaks up and says too bad he's stuck in a jar. If he were free, he would pick sides, and maybe he could help someone. Vladimir tells him to shut up. No one would trust him. Vladimir says the Kane children aren't the threat he once thought, and there's nothing they can do. ReadRiordan won't believe them, but it doesn't matter because Vladimir is going to kill them right now. Set once again brings up what a shame it is he's trapped in a jar. Maybe he could help. Vladimir summons a monster with 2 snake heads and the body of a dragon. Carter is really done with snakes. Vladimir laughs and says that's his speciality. There's no way they can fight it and Vladimir. Sadie looks at Carter and asks if she should do it, and Carter says go for it. Sadie then blows up Set's jar and a sandstorm fills the room. It slams into the creature and sends it flying backwards. Vladimir is then buried in red sand, and now standing in the room is Set. Sadie tells him to kill the monster, and Set says, oh, no, he can't do that. They're on their own. But he will delay Vladimir. Sadie curses Set, and then her and Carter sprint from the room. The monster chases them through the mansion. Carter and Sadie are 10 feet from the exit when Sadie notices the exit is chained up. Carter summons a fist and punches through the door. They race out into the winter night, but the monster pounces and lands right on Carter. Sadie throws a rock at the monster to gain its attention. It works, but now Sadie has to figure out how to defeat the monster. Sadie wishes she still had the goddess Isis. Then Sadie hears the voice of the goddess. Isis says that Sadie may not have her power anymore, but she can still use the magic of the gods, including divine words. Isis tells Sadie not to think. So Sadie doesn't. She raises her staff and the hieroglyph for Isis glows in the air. The monster sneers. However, Sadie's plan is interrupted by a Russian guard stumbling upon them. But it's not just any normal Russian guard, it's a Russian magician, and he pulls out his staff. Sadie's pretty sure he's working for Vladimir. She tries to convince him that Vladimir is on the wrong side. He's trying to free Apophis, but the guard doesn't speak very much English. When the monster charges, Carter then tackles the creature, and it doesn't go so well. The creature sinks its fangs into Carter's shoulder, and the venom is pumped into his body. Sadie is filled with rage. She screams and channels a power she didn't know she had, and summons light from her staff. It strikes the monster and it crumbles to dust. Sadie runs over to Carter and cradles his head. The Russian magician comes over and says the word Kane. Sadie just screams and says to leave, and surprisingly the magician listens. Sadie struggles to carry Carter. She needs to find Bess, but Carter is too heavy. Sadie tries to lift Carter, but almost drops him. Surprisingly, Set catches him and says they need to get out of here. Vladimir is right behind them. They carry him towards the chocolate shop. And on the way there, Set says this poison is incurable, and Carter will be dead in approximately 12 hours. It's actually really incredible stuff when you think about it. Finally, they find Bess, and he's not too pleased to see Set, but Sadie says they'll deal with that later. Carter is hurt. Bess tells Set to leave, but Set says they don't want that. Set knows the location of the last scroll, and he'll tell them if Sadie gives him back his secret name. Sadie says no way, then he'll kill them. Set promises he won't. Bess says not to trust him. Sadie asks if they can find the scroll without Set's help, and Bess says no, not likely. Sadie tells Bess to take care of Carter. He does and loads him into the car. Sadie agrees, but first she gives Set one more order. Set will not harm the Kane family until Ra is awakened. Set agrees and then says the scroll is in Barihara. Sadie then returns Set's secret name. Set smiles and gives Sadie one more piece of info. He tells Sadie the name of Zia Rashid's village, and then the god leaves. Sadie then sees Vladimir's magicians approaching them. Sadie gets in Bess's car and Bess drives away. Bess races through the city. Sadie tries to figure out how she can save Carter. She remembers the statue Jazz gave her. She could use it, but she's not too good at healing magic, and she only has one chance. Bess drives the car towards a bridge, where he opens a portal. But as Bess drives towards it, their car is hit, and Sadie hits her head. The last thing she remembers is the sound of water before she passes out. Sadie wakes up in her Ba form underwater. She can sense her body nearby but doesn't know how to reach it. She thinks, why the heck would Bess drive them into an underwater portal? The water then changes to fog, and Sadie finds herself floating in Brooklyn House. And sitting next to each other is Anubis and Walt, and they look as if someone has died. Sadie asks what the heck is going on, and Anubis turns to her. Anubis asks what she's doing here, and Sadie says she doesn't know. Anubis says Jazz's spirit must have called to her. Sadie asks if Jazz is dead. Is she dead? And Anubis says no, but you are both very close, so your souls can speak to each other. Sadie asks Anubis why Walt isn't speaking to her, and Anubis says he can't see them. But he suspects Walt can sense him. Walt called on him for guidance. Sadie asks why Walt would need guidance from him, and Anubis doesn't answer. He just says Sadie should move on, and then she's pulled back into the Duat. Sadie finds herself in Jazz's room, and she can see Jazz laying on the bed, but she can also see a shimmery form of Jazz at the end of the bed, her Ren. See, there are 5 parts of the soul in Egyptian mythology. The Ba is the personality, and the Ren is someone's name, their identity. Sadie tries to apologize to Jazz, but Jazz says it's not her fault. All things happen for a reason. Sadie asks why Jazz called her there, and Jazz says for 2 reasons. 1, when she wakes up, she's only gonna have a few minutes to heal Carter. Sadie asks how. She doesn't know healing magic. Jazz says she does. To think on what Isis said and to not think. That's how she channeled her power in Russia. Jazz then brings up the second thing she needs to tell Sadie. She's going to need Walt's help, even if it means losing a life. She can use the amulet that Walt gave her to call him back to her. Sadie asks what does she mean by losing a life, but Jazz doesn't answer and says she should go see Isis now, and then Sadie is pulled back into the Duat. Sadie now finds herself on a boat on the Nile. Sadie sees Ra on his throne, but he's old, and much like Carter, there's fang marks on his shoulder, and Sadie can see the venom running through the god's veins. Ra then calls to Isis and tells her he relents. Isis appears, and Ra tells her that he knows she created the snake that bit him. He knows Isis is trying to gain the throne for her husband. Ra is tired. He tells Isis to heal him and he will give her his secret name in return. When Isis approaches Ra, he whispers in her ear. Isis is then set on fire and she sees flashes of Ra's life. When the fire fades, Ra is shocked. She's still alive. She survived learning his secret name. Isis stands, then places her hand on his leg and the venom disappears. And then he calls Bast. Bast appears and Ra says to come. They have to go. Bast asks where, and Ra tells her he is being forced into retirement. Ra tells Isis she may have won and Osiris may become pharaoh, but it will be short-lived. Without Ra's boat riding the Duat every night, soon the balance between Mot and chaos will tip. And when they need his help, he will not be there. Ra and Bast then disappear, and Sadie wakes in a soft bed. She's in a white robe. She exits the room and enters the living room to find Carter on a couch with Bess nearby. Bess says it's about time. Sadie says she has to help Carter. Where's her wand and wax figurine? Bess says he'll go get them. Sadie asks how long she was out and where they are. Bess says 12 hours. And they're in Alexandria, Egypt. They're in a hotel. People respect gods around here. Sadie is more focused on the 12 hours. That's how long Set said Carter had to live. Sadie crouches near Carter and grabs the wax figurine. Sadie starts to understand all she saw, how it's connected to Carter. Sadie lays her hand on Carter and tells him she's going to heal him, but first she's going to need his help. A secret name is more than something used to control people. It makes up who someone is, and it has more power if you know that person well, but it can only be told by that person. Sadie asks Carter what his secret name is. Sadie closes her eyes and looks into his mind, but he resists her. Sadie says she knows it's hard, but he can do it. She's his sister and she loves him, even the annoying bits. And then all of a sudden, Carter's life flashes before her eyes and she sees his secret name. Sadie raises the wax figurine and speaks Carter's secret name. Immediately, the venom leaves his body and enters the figurine instead. And then Carter opens his eyes. And Sadie tells him to never do that again. Carter asks if Sadie just spoke his secret name, and Sadie says, yep. Carter covers his eyes in embarrassment. Bess comes over and offers him some chocolate. They have a lot to discuss, but first they should both get some rest, even if they only have 2 days before the sun is swallowed. Later on, Bess gets them some new clothes and they sit around a table eating. Sadie catches Carter up on everything that's happened, but she doesn't tell him the name of Zia's village as she doesn't think he needs that distraction right now. Instead, they talk about the last location of the scroll in Barihara. Bess says it's most likely underground in a tomb. If they can get close enough, the other two scrolls should react like a magnet. But they need to be careful, there's a lot of mummies there. Carter says they can leave in the morning, but Bess says they should avoid using magic as it will probably attract Vladimir, so they'll have to travel the 200 miles on their own. Finally, Sadie comes clean on the information about Zia, how Set said she's at the place of the red sands. This matches what the spirit told Carter at the museum. Carter is ecstatic. This means Zia is in the ruins of her old village. They can go find her. Carter asks Bess if he could find the village. Bess says probably, but they wouldn't have time. They can't make it to Barihara and the village before the equinox. Sadie says they'll split up. She'll go find the scroll, and Carter and Bess can go find Zia in her village. Carter seems guilty. He can't leave Sadie all on her own, and Sadie says she won't be on her own. She'll have Walt. Bess tries to argue against this, but Sadie says they don't really have much of a choice. Sadie says they'll both have 24 hours, and then they will meet back here after. Then Sadie leaves to go get ready and summons Walt with the amulet. Carter and Bess leave in an old pickup truck and travel down a dusty road towards Zia's village. Carter feels extremely guilty over leaving Sadie, but he has to do this. He promised Zia, and if Carter is being honest with himself, he wanted to be away from Sadie for a bit after she discovered his secret name. Carter also thinks on what Sadie has discovered, another way to practice the path of the gods, without actually having a god inside you. Could he tap into the power of Horus like Sadie did Isis? The more you learned about the god, the closer you got to learning their Ren, their secret name, and with that, you can also use their power. Bess then speaks up and warns Carter that this is most likely a trap, and Carter is going to need to be prepared. This is something Vladimir would do. Bess would know this best, as Vladimir's grandfather once kidnapped Bess. Carter tries to ask Bess more about it, but Bess changes the subject. Bess tells Carter he likes him. Him and Sadie are alright, but warns Carter to be careful with Zia. Saving someone's life often complicates things. Bess and Carter then arrive at the village, to find it buried in sand. Bess and Carter search the village for hours and find nothing. Carter eventually makes his way into the river and hits something wooden with his staff. When he looks down, he sees a staircase going downwards. He calls Bess over and Bess says he better part the river quick. Carter says he doesn't know how to do that, and Bess says it's easy. However, then Bess goes quiet and screams, "Get out of the water." But before they can, 3 pillars of water shoot out of the river and Bess is pulled under, and they form into what Carter describes as water zombies. Bess breaks the surface and says they're water demons. Carter needs to ward them off. Bess screams boo and one disappears, but before he can take care of the second, he's once again pulled underwater. One of the water demons charges Carter and Carter throws up a shield, but he's pulled under. He can't breathe. Just when he thinks he's going to die, Bess pulls him up, but then Bess is pulled under. But perhaps the little bit of oxygen helped Carter think clearly and calm down. He thinks about what Sadie says and he thinks about Horus. He channels the power and the river explodes, revealing the staircase into Zia's tomb. And thankfully, the water demons are gone. Carter goes over to Bess, who is stuck in the mud, and helps him up. They both turn to see an entrance to a tomb, and above it is the hieroglyph for Zia. Bess says Carter better prepare himself. The water demons were guarding something, and there's probably worse inside. And with that, Carter pushes the door to the tomb open and walks down the stairs. Inside, Carter finds Zia floating in a water sarcophagus. She's in white robes, and in her crossed arms is a shepherd's hook and a war flail, the symbols of the pharaoh. On the sarcophagus is the symbol of Nephthys. Bess says that's a bad combination. Nephthys is a water goddess and Zia uses fire magic. It's not a good combination, and it's probably why Iskandar put her to sleep. It could have killed her. Bess then gasps and points out the crook and flail. Bess says those are the original crook and flail of Ra. Bess says that's some serious protection magic, and probably why Apophis hasn't been able to touch her despite knowing her location. Carter asks what happens when they wake her. Bess says the protection spell will be broken, and might be why Apophis led Carter here. Carter touches the water sarcophagus and can sense Zia's thoughts. She's partially conscious, and she's in pain. She's plagued with nightmares from Apophis. Bess says that shouldn't be possible, and if that is the case, Zia's in trouble. Carter sinks his hand further into the water. Carter uses the same power he used in the river, but less, and slowly the water begins to melt away like an ice cube. The crook and flail drop and Zia's eyes shoot open. She can't breathe. Bess says her body is rejecting Nephthys. They need to get her to the river. Carter grabs her and rushes her up the stairs and into the river. As soon as she touches the water, her body relaxes, and water starts spewing from her mouth. The water takes shape and forms the goddess Nephthys, who tells Bess hello. She also tells Carter sorry for picking Zia as a host. It wasn't a good combination for either of them, but to take good care of Zia as she will have an important place in destiny. Nephthys then dissolves back into the Nile. Zia, however, is still choking, so Carter does what anyone would do and performs mouth to mouth. Zia starts breathing again and then coughs up more water. Once she's calmed down, she is not happy and punches Carter in the face. She tells Carter to stay away from her and demands to know where Iskandar is. But before Carter can answer, Zia remembers a dream she had and says he can't be dead. That's not possible. He can't leave her. Zia then walks away and sits on the steps to her tomb and begins to cry. Carter wants to comfort her, but he doesn't want to make it worse. Carter approaches her and Zia asks why Iskandar would do this to her. Carter explains he was trying to protect her. He didn't know she would have nightmares. Carter's been looking for her ever since. Zia asks why. She barely knows him, and Carter explains all that happened with her Shopti. Zia says that wasn't her, but Carter says it was. She can remember if she tries. Zia says no, you're a Kane. You're the enemy. You're traveling with a god. They will be put to death. Carter tries to talk to her, explain that Iskandar put her with the crook and flail for a reason. They need the gods. It was a sign. Zia tells Carter to stop talking. Stop trying to brainwash her. Carter says he's not brainwashing her. It's the truth. Bess says they should really go. Carter begs Zia to come with them. He can protect her. Zia exclaims she doesn't need protection and then summons a fireball. Carter on reflex holds up the crook and flail, and Zia's staff instantly shatters. This angers Zia. How dare he use the power of Ra? Carter stammers that he didn't mean to. Bess then speaks up. Something isn't right. Carter turns and a white light blinds them. When it's gone, Bess is frozen in a cage made of white light. And behind it is Disjordan and Vladimir. Carter tries to tell Disjordan that Vladimir is a traitor, but Vladimir says it's just all tricks, just like he was trying to trick Zia. Disjordan says not only do they find them with a god, but with the weapons of Ra, stolen from the House of Life. Carter tries to explain it's not like that. Disjordan tells Zia to come with him. Zia says she had strange dreams. She saw things. Disjordan says she's just confused from being asleep. Don't trust Carter. He and his sister made a pact with Set. Carter tries to explain it was because Apophis was escaping. Zia has to remember. Zia says she's sorry and then joins Disjordan and Vladimir. Vladimir says they will take care of her, take her back to the first gnome. Vladimir says they will take Carter back to the first gnome and execute him. Meanwhile, Sadie and Walt travel on camels, transformed from one of Walt's amulets. And Sadie is not too happy with the smell the camels produce, especially in the very hot desert. Sadie can tell that Walt is deep in thought, so she breaks the silence by commenting on the weather. How it's the perfect day to confide in a friend if one happened to have, a life-threatening situation. Walt tells Sadie he didn't mean to hide anything from her. It's just hard to talk about. Walt brings up his ancestry line. He's descended from the pharaoh Akhenaten. Akhenaten created a city in Egypt that only worshipped one god, the sun god, but not Ra. After he died, the priests of Ra weren't happy with him, and the city didn't last, and his name was wiped from history. Egypt went back to worshipping all the gods. To punish him, the gods placed a curse on his descendants. King Tut was the first to suffer from it. He died at 19. Sadie asks what curse, but before Walt can answer, their camels stop, and Sadie spots an oasis in the distance, and standing on top of a sand dune is a cat that greets them with, "It's about time." Sadie instantly recognizes the voice as Boss. She's talking to them from inside the Duat. Her bod took control of this cat in order to do so and pass along a message. Boss tells Sadie that Apophis has a demon army working on his cage and is planning his release to coincide with the release of Ra. In fact, he's banking on them reviving Ra. It's all part of his plan. Sadie says that makes no sense. Why would he want his arch-enemy revived? Boss doesn't know, but Apophis thinks for some reason it will help him escape the Duat tomorrow. Sadie thinks Apophis wants chaos, and if Ra comes back, the gods could be thrown into a civil war. The magicians of the House of Life are already divided. Walt asks if they should revive Ra. Sadie says they have to. Apophis believes Ra will divide them, not unite them, but they have to believe he's wrong. Reviving Ra is their only chance. Boss tells Sadie not to underestimate Apophis, he's strong. Sadie says that's why they need Boss back as soon as possible. Sadie tells Boss to head to Brooklyn House and help Amos defend against Vladimir. He's even more crazy than they thought. And in the meantime, Sadie and Walt will get the last scroll. Boss tells Walt and Sadie the direction they should go in. Boss then tries to warn them something about roaming ghosts, but before she can finish, her spirit fades away and Sadie is left talking to just a cat. They feed the cat, transform their camels back into amulets, and then walk the rest of the way on foot. They get to the location that Boss talked about, but Sadie doesn't spot an entrance to a tomb. She only sees a water tower. Sadie then notices a wet spot in the sand and tells Walt to help her dig. As they begin digging, they hit stone. Sadie points her staff towards the ground and speaks the spell for destruction. Heidi, the ground explodes and starts to cave in. Sadie and Walt run and make it just to the edge of the crater and watch as the water tower falls into the hole. Sadie says, "Sorry, my bad." They walk back and see a row of golden mummies in what's left of the tomb. Sadie asks Walt to help her down into the crater. Walt and Sadie climb down and find a corridor. They take it till they find the burial chamber. They find 3 mummies. Sadie asks how they died, and a voice answers the wasting disease. Sadie spins around, staff in hands, and finds a Roman ghost. The ghost says they haven't had new dead in a while. Where's their bodies? Sadie says, no, we're alive actually. And the ghost gasps. Surely they're priests from the House of Life, and they know the ritual. They've brought offerings, right? You see, these bodies were buried with Egyptian customs, but they weren't done right. And they couldn't go to the Roman underworld because they had an Egyptian ceremony. So their souls have been tethered to their bodies ever since. Most just sleep now. Walt says they can help. Sadie says they can, and then Walt elbows her in the side, and Sadie says, of course they can. But first, they need something. They have to find the last scroll of the Book of Ra. The ghost then introduces himself as Mad Claude and says, will this book help them release them? And Sadie says it might. So Mad Claude leads them to the oldest parts of the catacombs. They make it to a room and they start looking around. Sadie notices a door on the other side, but it's blocked by rocks. Walt notices a statue and asks who it's of. Mad Claude says it's Batu, the god of craftsmanship. Sadie asks why the statue is here, and then she notices a symbol on the statue. It's the same symbol that's on her knife that Anubis gave to her. She then remembers something. Batu is also the god of opening. She then notices a door on the other side of the room and figures the scroll must be behind it. They have to open it. So Sadie pulls out her staff and the knife and speaks the divine word for open. But nothing happens. So she tries making an offering to the statue. She leaves some jerky. But again, nothing happens. Claude says this is pointless. Why can't they just use the knife on him? Sadie says she needs the knife to free Ra. It was given to her by Anubis. Claude doesn't understand. If they know Anubis, can't they just get more knives? Claude then looks at Walt and senses something. Claude says Walt is dying. Sadie gasps. What does he mean? Claude says he's got the Pharaoh's curse. Sadie demands Walt explains. Walt explains it runs in his family. Not everyone gets it, but if you do, you die young. His own father died at 18 and Walt is now 16. Sadie gasps. Is that why he was talking to Jazz, trying to figure out if Jazz could heal him? Walt says they tried, but unfortunately nothing worked. Sadie says there has to be a way, maybe if she knew his secret name. But Walt says it's no use. It can't be cured, only slowed down. The more magic he does, the faster he will die. This is why Bess wanted him to stay behind. And Sadie says he should have listened. Claude interrupts and says they promised to free him, and the others. And they need to come to the Roman tombs now. Sadie says they said they would try and free them. But they only have one knife. Even if they used it on him, they wouldn't be able to free the others. This makes Claude angry, and he says fine. they will come to them. And then he disappears. Sadie asks what he meant, but Walt doesn't know, so Sadie figures they better figure out a way to open the door fast. They try their best, but they can't get it open, and Sadie is a little distracted. There has to be a way to cure Walt. She can't lose him. Walt says not to worry, he's okay with it, and he wants to spend his remaining time he has left with her. At this, Sadie blushes and changes the subject. Sadie asks if Anubis could help. Walt says he's asked, but it's no good, he can't do anything. At first, Walt didn't want to come to Brooklyn House and learn magic, but he decided he needed to live his life and not be afraid, and despite everything, he's happy. Sadie is listening, but something Walt said has her thinking. Then she gets an idea, a sympathy link. They can join a big pile of rocks to the smaller one, and when they move the smaller pile, in theory, it should move the bigger one and unblock the door. Sadie speaks the word for join, and it starts working. Finally, the whole pile is moved, but Sadie is exhausted. Walt tells her great job, and then kisses her. Sadie, who was already lightheaded, is even more so now. Inside is a box with Set's symbol on it. Sadie figures if Set wanted her dead, he would have done so already. So Sadie opens the box and grabs the scroll. Thankful nothing happened. Sadie's about to say they should leave when they hear moaning. In the distance, thousands of spirits are waking up. Walt finishes her sentence and says, leave now, and they sprint for the exit. But when they get there, the exit is blocked by mummies. One approaches them and Walt touches it and it dissolves into ash. Sadie asks if he can do it again, but he can't do it 1,000 times. Sadie instantly feels bad for asking him to do magic. Clearly, it's taken a toll on Walt. Claude then appears in front of them and says, free them and they can leave. Sadie says they can't, they only have one knife. Claude says shame. He'll have to kill them then and take the knife, and then he disappears. The mummies surge forward. Walt suggests fire, but before Sadie can agree, she hears something. The next thing they know, the room is overrun with rats. The rats start tearing into the zombies, and Claude screams no as his image begins to flicker. Before he fades away entirely, he swears his revenge. The rats leave, and when Sadie turns, she sees a farmer, but it's not just any farmer, it's the god Patu, and he thanks Sadie for the offering and says sorry he couldn't answer sooner. He tells them to have a seat. Sadie asks why he's a farmer, and Patu says he borrowed it to come talk to them. It's probably for the best, as the farmer was going to shoot them for destroying his water tower. Sadie asks what's going to happen to the spirits. Patu says they will be fine now, that their bodies were destroyed so they should be able to pass over. Patu says Sadie has bigger issues. Carter is in deep trouble. Sadie jumps up and asks if he can send her to him, and Patu says he thought she'd never ask. He waves his hand and a portal appears. The god says they will face enemy and friends, but which are which? He does not know and he wishes them luck. Patu tries to warn them about the Book of Rav, but then coughs. He must leave the host. Patu tells Walt there is an answer for him, even if he doesn't like it. The god then leaves the host, and then hand in hand, Walt and Sadie enter the portal. Meanwhile, Carter is backed against the wall. His weapons are gone, and he's holding the crook and flail, which is apparently stolen property, and Zia thinks he's the enemy. Desjardins tells Carter to surrender. Don't make this any harder than it needs to be. Carter tries to buy time. For what, he doesn't know, but he's out of options. Carter demands Vlad tell him what he's planning. Why he let them go to Russia. Does he want them to awaken Ra? Is that all part of his plan to awaken Apophis? Vlad says he has no idea what he's talking about. Desjardins tells Carter to stop. Vlad is a hero of the House of Life. Carter pleads with the chief lector. He's lying. Desjardins says enough, surrender or be destroyed. Carter says he's not going easy, and when Vlad raises his staff, Carter attacks with the crook and flail. The staff flies from Vlad's hand and lands in the Nile. Carter swings the weapons again, and Vlad goes flying backwards. Desjardins raises his own staff and tells Carter to stop, or he'll be destroyed. Carter responds, you'll kill me anyway. And then Carter feels power flow through him. And then he's floating above the ground, encased in his combat avatar, for the first time since Horus left him. Then Vlad rises, and Desjardins tells him to stay back, but Vlad doesn't listen. He attacks Carter. Lines on the ground appear, racing towards Carter. When they reach him, they start wrapping around him like snakes. Carter can feel the magic draining out of him, so he raises his sword to attack. Vlad tells him to do it, but when Carter looks over and sees Zia, she's terrified, so Carter hesitates just long enough for the lines to continue draining magic for him. His combat avatar fades and Carter falls to the ground, barely conscious. Zia pleads with Vlad to stop. Desjardins says that's enough, but Vlad doesn't stop, and then a portal opens under Bess's cage. The cage breaks and Walt and Sadie burst through. Bess, now free, grabs Vlad and screams, "Boo!" Vlad and Disjardin disintegrate and the spell fades from Carter. Zia screams, "You killed them!" Bess says, "Nah, just scared them home. They'll be unconscious for a bit, but they're fine." Zia screams to stay away from her. Sadie slowly approaches and says it's fine, they won't hurt her. And then the day finally catches up with Zia and she passes out. Carter asks Sadie if she got the scroll, and Sadie pulls it out and says they need to get to the Great Pyramid right away. Carter puts the crook and flail in his bag. They grab Zia and hitch a ride in the pickup truck. Bess tells him to get some rest. He'll keep watch. Walt and Sadie fall asleep, but Carter can't. He keeps thinking of everything that happened and the fact that the real Zia is asleep right next to him. Eventually, Carter is able to drift, and his ba immediately drifts away. Carter finds himself in the Hall of Ages with Horus. Horus tells Carter that he's on the threshold of greatness. Horus then points to Carter, and when he looks down, he's not a chicken. He's in his own body, and he's holding the crook and flail. Carter says these aren't his, and Horus says they can be. They are tools of the Pharaoh. Together, he and Carter could unite the House of Life and crush their enemies. Before, this would have scared Carter, but now Carter thinks, what if Horus is right? What if he could lead everyone against Apophis? And now he has confidence he could do it without Horus taking over his body. But then he remembers how Zia looked at him, terrified, and shakes his head. No, these are the weapons of Ra, and they need to awaken him so he can lead the gods. Horus says even if that's what Apophis wants, if that's what Vlad's planning, Horus then tells Carter Vlad's history. He once thought like Carter. He wanted to wake Ra, but the attempt burned him and left him scarred. He tried to destroy the scrolls after, but he wasn't strong enough. Now he seeks to awake Ra for revenge. What if the same thing happens to Sadie when she reads the scrolls? Why take the risk? Carter could take the throne now. Carter says no, they are not enough. They need Ra. And then Horus fades and Carter finds himself looking at Vlad and a barely conscious Disjardin. Mott once sustained his life, but now with Mott being threatened, he is dying. Vlad says all will be fine once they deal with the Kanes, but Disjardin isn't so sure anymore. Vlad says he can't be weak now. They must stick to the plan. They are strong. And then Vlad points to the other side of the room. Filling it is an army with not only magicians but demons as well. Vlad gasps, since when do they use creatures of chaos? And Vlad reassures him he has them all under control. If they are to take Brooklyn House, they have to be ruthless. Vlad tells Disjardin to leave it all up to him. He can stay here and rest while he watches the progress. Disjardin hesitates. Carter hopes he will come to his senses, but Disjardin's shoulders slump, and he tells Vlad to go and execute his plan. Just get the creatures out of his sight. However, when Vlad leaves, Disjardin does not go and rest. He tells a scribe to bring him a book on beating Apophis. And then Carter's Bob returns to his body. Carter wakes up in a hotel room to Bess, Sadie, and Zia sitting around a table, playing a game. Carter notes that Zia looks better. She says Carter's been out for quite some time, and Sadie managed to calm her down. Originally, she tried to escape. This is their third hotel room. Zia destroyed the first two. But Sadie convinced Zia to at least talk to Carter first. This shocks Carter. Zia and Sadie hated each other. Zia says no, that was a shop tea. Zia actually quite likes Sadie. Carter asks what they're playing, and Sadie says Senate. Carter asks why they are wasting time. Bess explains they can't do anything till sunset anyway. With the equinox so close, the only time they can open a portal will be sunset or sunrise. Sadie says if they want to find Ra, they will need to travel his route into the Duat, entering at sunset and exiting at sunrise. Carter asks how she knows this, and Sadie says she put the scrolls together and read it in the Book of Ra. This shocks Carter. Sadie says she didn't read the spell. She'll wait till they find Ra for that. But she read the intro, so she knows where they're going. Carter says if they go. Zia says, what do you mean? And then Carter explains his dream and what Vlad has planned for Brooklyn House. Zia says he can't abandon his quest. Iskander hid her for a reason with the crook and flail. Zia believes that Iskander was sending her a message that it's time to once again follow the path of the gods. Ra needs to be awakened, and Vlad needs to be stopped. Zia believes he is draining Disjardin's power. Carter asks what about Brooklyn House? How can he stop Vlad if he needs to awaken Ra? Zia says she'll go to Brooklyn House and stop him. Walt volunteers to go with her. And Sadie says you can't, not in your condition. Carter asks what condition? Walt explains his curse to the others. Walt says this is his choice. Besides, Zia will need Walt to convince the others that she comes in peace. It's decided then. Walt and Zia will head to Brooklyn House at sunset. Carter, Sadie, and Bess will open a portal on top of the Great Pyramid and enter the Duat. Later, they all head to the pyramid to open the portal. As Sadie is working on opening the portal, Zia pulls Carter aside. And she tells him she's thankful he found her, but that she needs time to figure everything out. But she promises to do her best to protect his home. Zia makes Carter promise to listen to his heart and not the will of the gods. Carter promises, and then they separate. Bess will make sure Walt and Zia get through their portal and make it to Brooklyn House. Zia and Walt go through their portal first, and Sadie and Carter jump through theirs, with Bess promising to meet them in the Duat. Carter and Sadie find themselves by a river in London, but not exactly London. Almost like they are just beneath London in another world, but can see through the surface. Carter spots a boat, and on it is Neckbet and Babi. Neckbet warns them that this is the point of no return. Once they go past here, they won't be able to come back. They will have to travel through the 12 houses of the Duat. Sadie says there's no stopping them. They will succeed. They'll revive Ra, and they'll unite the gods. Carter then raises the crook and flail and demands that Neckbeck and Babi swear that they will be loyal to Ra once he's revived. Neckbeck says fine, but it doesn't matter because they're going to die on their quest anyway. They then disappear. Carter and Sadie climb aboard the decrepit-looking boat. When they step on the boat, their clothes change, and they are now in ancient Egypt attire. Sadie makes fun of Carter for wearing a skirt. Carter ignores his sister and says, "Let's just go." He then steps on a splinter, seeing that they are also barefoot, and curses. The boat starts to push away from the shore, and then gets stuck, and it starts to spin, and they hear voices. One whispers, "Traitor." Sadie gasps. The boat doesn't like her. It senses Isis. It's mad over her poisoning Ra. Sadie tries to reason with the boat. She's not Isis. In fact, Sadie wants to bring Ra back. All of a sudden, golden orbs form. Spirits of Ra's crew then surround Sadie. Sadie says if they want Ra back, they'll have to listen to her and help her man the boat. Surprisingly, they listen. Sadie just hopes they're not plotting their revenge. The boat then sails into the Duat. The city of London fades away as they travel deeper and deeper into the Duat. Sadie explains they are entering the second house. Each hour of the night represents a different house. As they drift down the river, absolutely nothing happens. Sadie thinks maybe the first test is boredom. And as soon as she says it, something happens. A giant foot appears in front of their boat. It belongs to a giant that says if they are bored, he could kill them. Sadie says, "No please, and who are you?" The giant laughs and says if they knew his name, he could let them pass. They've made it all the way to the gates of the fourth house. Farther than most. However, since they don't know his name, he will have to slice them to bits. Sadie says if they name him, they can pass. The giant says yes, but no one ever does. Carter and Sadie recognize him. They saw his statue at the Brooklyn Museum, Khnum, but that's not good enough. They need his secret name. The giant says yes, but good luck. Not even he knows it. He is part of Ra, but when Ra left, he was stuck here to guard the gate, hoping for one day to reunite with Ra. Then Sadie remembers something from the Book of Ra. Ra rose from chaos. The first god of all gods are from him. Sadie then opens the Book of Ra and starts reading the first part of the spell. Sadie reads, "I name you from chaos. I name you protector of the fourth gate. I return your name. I return your essence to Ra." The giant smiles and says, "Well done. You may proceed. But be warned, the second form of Ra won't be as easy, and he will not be as grateful for your help." Sadie asks what he means, but the first part of Ra just dissolves into mist, and the boat continues onwards. Carter tells Sadie, "Good job," and then asks why her face is red. Sadie says, "No, your face is red." Then they turn and say they are headed right for a waterfall made of fire that lands in the lake of fire. Carter screams. They have to turn around. Sadie then remembers another line from the book, "Reborn in fire." Sadie says no, they need to keep going. It's what Ra did. Carter screams that Ra wasn't flammable. Sadie then opens her bag and pulls out a brush. She begins to paint something on Carter's forehead. She writes the hieroglyph for fire and shield on him. Carter bursts into flames, but they aren't hurting him. Sadie writes the same hieroglyph quickly on the back of her hand, and then grips the railing right before the boat plunges off the edge of the waterfall. Or is it a firefall? The boat hits the bottom and they are submerged under fire. Sadie can feel her spell breaking. She didn't have enough time to do hers right. She can feel the heat. And then Carter grips her hand, and Sadie remembers what Amos once said to her. Her and Carter are stronger together, and she can feel her shield becoming stronger. And then the boat surges upwards and they break the surface. When Sadie looks around, the boat is brand new, polished and shiny, and the crew seems happier. The boat stops at a dock, and Sadie hugs her brother. He asks where they are, and a voice from the dock tells them Sunny Acres, formerly known as the House of Rest. It's Bess. Bess says they better head inside before their stalker catches up. Sadie asks what he means, and when they turn around, they see a boat on top of the firefall, and on it is Vladimir. Bess says hurry, they need to find the sun god. They enter what Sadie describes as an Egyptian nursing home. In the room are patients, withered and old, all with blank stares. Some are human and some have animal heads. Bess says they should head to the nurse's station. As they approach, Bess curses and tells Carter and Sadie they'll need to do this without him, and then he proceeds to hide behind a potted plant. Sadie says they don't have time for this. They walk up to the station and say, "Excuse me." A very large nurse turns around and Carter yelps. She's a hippo, and she has on a bikini top. The hippo lady greets them. Then Carter asks if she's Duat, the goddess. Duat says yes and asks if they are looking for someone. But before Carter and Sadie can answer, Duat spots Bess and calls out. Bess steps out from behind the plant and says, "This plant looks good. I should check on the next." Bess is not able to check on the next plant or continue ignoring Duat as the goddess calls to him once again. Bess very awkwardly greets the goddess. Duat rushes over to Bess. Sadie comments, "You two used to date, didn't you?" And Duat says yes, a very long time ago. Bess says that's not important. They are here on important business. Bess then kicks Sadie in the leg. She gets the message. Sadie says they are looking for Ra to revive him. At this, Duat gasps. She asks Bess if he's helping them with this. Sadie says yes, as a favor to Boss. At this, things go cold. Duat gets an angry look on her face, and Sadie instantly knows she said something wrong. Duat says she sees for Bast. Sadie says it's really important. Bess tells Sadie to tell Duat what's going on. They can trust her. At this, Duat warms up again. Sadie explains everything that's happened and how Apophis is planning to escape. Duat looks at the sundial. It reads 5. This isn't good. They are running out of time. Certain houses can only be exited and entered at certain hours. Right now, they are in the 5th hour and the 4th house. The 4th house can be exited or entered any time, but others can't. The 8th, for example, can only be entered at the 8th hour, and the 12th can only be exited at sunrise. They can't afford to fall much further behind or they will be locked in the Duat until tomorrow night. Which would be bad, because if they don't stop Apophis, there won't be a tomorrow night. Sadie says, "Let's hurry then. Where is Ra?" Duat responds she doesn't know. There's thousands of gods here, and the rooms can go on forever. Sadie gasps. All the patients are gods? Duat nods. Most are minor deities, forgotten from the world, so they come here to wait and waste away. Sadie asks Duat how she can stand working here. Isn't it depressing? Duat says yes, but she likes to help, and she wasn't needed in the world above anymore. At this, she looks at Bess and he turns away. Duat was needed here, and she understands them, what it's like to not be wanted. At this, Bess interrupts and says they are running out of time. They need to find Ra. Duat looks at Bess and asks him if this is really important, or if he's just doing it for Bast. Bess stumbles. Yes, no, yes. He tells Duat it is important. They need her help. Duat says follow her. They wander the halls of the nursing home, following Duat. Sadie holds the Book of Ra, hoping it will react if the god is close. They then see a woman with a frog head hopping down the hall, and Duat says, "Excuse me, I'll be right back." As they wait, Sadie turns to Bess and says Duat is nice, and she clearly likes him. Bess responds, "Too nice. She's always saving him." In fact, Duat was the one who saved him from Vladimir's grandfather when he was captured. They went out a couple times, but Bess was obsessed with someone else. Carter states Bast. Bess's shoulders slump. Bast only ever saw him as a little brother, but it took Bess a long time to realize that. And over the years, he treated Duat horribly. Duat then comes back, and Sadie gasps. She knows why the book isn't working. She needs to start the second part of the spell. Sadie starts the spell, and as she reads, she starts smoking. The smoke drifts in the air, almost as if it's guiding them. Duat takes Sadie's arm and starts guiding her. Carter and Bess follow. Soon they stop in front of a door. They push the door open and Sadie continues reading. Inside, there's an old man lying on a bed. He's so pale Sadie can see his veins. Sadie motions to the window and Bess opens the shade. The room is flooded with light from the river of fire. Sadie continues the spell. She places the book on the bed and motions to Carter. Carter understands. He grabs the knife from Anubis and hands it to Sadie. Sadie speaks the last line of the spell. She touches the knife to the god's mouth. The god gasps. The smoke is pulled into his mouth and then his eyes open. But he still looks really old. Bess says he's not fully awake yet. They need to continue their journey. There's still one more aspect of Ra they need to complete the last spell. Ra responds with a toothless grin, with a proclamation of, "I like zebras. Weasels are whack." Carter takes the crook and flail and offers them to Ra. Ra takes them and starts chewing on them. Carter says, let's get him back to the boat. Bess grabs the sun god and they run back through the nursing home as Ra screams, "Wee!" from Bess's back. When they get back to the lobby, they see an amulet of a snake on the ground. Vlad was here and he's taunting them. Duat then looks at the sundial. It reads 8. They're too late. If they leave, they won't be able to make it past the 8th house. They've lost. Duat leads them back to the boat. She tells them not to give up. Perhaps Anuru will have the answers. Carter asks who, and Duat says not who, but what. Anuru is the 7th house. She tells Carter to tell their dad hello. She then bids them goodbye as they board the boat with Ra screaming, "Zebras!" When Ra steps onto the boat, light erupts, and his throne once again sits on the boat. Carter tries to get him into the seat, but Ra screams, "No seat!" and then runs into a column. Carter and Sadie pick up a slightly dazed Ra and place him on the throne, but Ra is still the same. The boat continues sailing onward. They sail through the 5th and 6th house quickly, and soon they enter the 7th house, Anuru, or otherwise known as the Egyptian afterlife, the house of Osiris. They exit the boat and are greeted by Osiris. Their dad sweeps them into a hug, and then their mom is greeting them. Carter and Sadie fight back tears. They've failed. Osiris says none of that now. It's time to rest and renew. And he and their mom are so proud of them. Their mom says come. They've prepared a feast. When they walk inside, Carter gasps. It looks just like their old home in LA, before their mom died. And in the center of the table is a cake. Their mom says, "Happy birthday, Sadie." Osiris says, "Take a seat." He asks Bess to place Ra at the head of the table. As Sadie sits, she notices something. There's 7 chairs, but only 6 of them. They all feast on pizza and cake, which Ra calls moon pie. But Sadie says this is pointless. Nice, but pointless. They failed. They've run out of time. They can't continue their journey, and Ra is an old kook. Osiris says he's still the sun god, and she should show him some respect. But Sadie is right. They've run out of time. But perhaps they can get some extra time. Their mom says it's dangerous. Sadie asks, "What's dangerous?" And a voice says, "Me." Sadie and Carter turn to see a man in a silver suit, Konshu, god of the moon. He takes a seat in the open chair and says, "Care to play a game?" Bess says, "Absolutely not, you scam artist." Konshu smiles and says, "Bess, old buddy, how are you?" Bess says, "You're not my buddy." Konshu says, "I'm hurt." See, Bess once played Konshu for more time with Boss, and apparently he lost some of his height. Their mom once again says this is too dangerous. Then Carter remembers Nut once played Konshu for extra days, the demon days. Konshu says yes, he's the moon god, but he also has some control over time. If he and Sadie are willing to play Senet and gamble with him, perhaps if they win, he can stretch the moonlight so the doors to the 8th house haven't closed yet. What do they say? 3 pieces for him and 3 for them, since they need 3 hours back, 1 for each piece. For each of his piece they capture, they get 1 hour. But for each he gets, he receives their Ren, their secret name, their soul. But he doesn't just want their name, he wants to devour it. They won't die, but they'll basically become vegetables, a body with no soul. And they will need a 3rd person to play with them, as it's 3 souls up against 3 hours. Bess warns them not to do this, and their mother agrees. Carter squares his jaw. They're Canes. They don't run from hard situations. Sadie says for once, Carter is right. They'll play. Konshu says great, but they still need a 3rd. Bess volunteers. Sadie says no, they can't ask him to do that. Bess says he wants to, but if things go bad, just promise that they will tell Duat that he tried to turn back time. Konshu says, let's play. Their parents wish them luck. They believe in them, and then they vanish. The game starts out well enough. They manage to get one of Konshu's pieces, but Konshu quickly catches up. Konshu rolls the one number he needed, 3, and claims one of their pieces. He asks who wants to give up their soul first. Bess volunteers. Sadie says no. Bess says it's alright. It was always going to happen. They were never going to not lose a piece. Now they can win easily. Sadie says no, he can't do this. Bess says it's alright. He's a god. Maybe he can come back one day. Just win this game for him and kick Vlad's butt. Konshu then opens his mouth and Bess flickers and then disappears. Sadie lets her rage take over and they claim Konshu's next 2 pieces easily. They get their hours back. Sadie tells Konshu she hates him. Sadie lunges for him, but he and the room vanish, and they find themselves back on the boat. They sail on. They enter the 8th house, the house of challenges. They fight monsters and serpents as they sail on. And finally, they enter the 12th house, Carter can smell and see the mortal world, but in front of them in the river is a giant hole, almost as if a crater hit it. Sadie says they could sail around it. It's probably a trap from Apophis. Carter looks at her and says, let's go tell Apophis we don't appreciate that. And then the boat sails into the hole. They don't crash, but their boat simply floats and continues sailing on. They enter a cavern, and the magical energy is the most Carter has ever seen or sensed. They see a shore covered in scarab beetles, the same shore that Horus took Carter to once, and underneath it is a serpenoid shape trying to break through. Standing next to it is Vlad and his demon army. He welcomes them. They are just in time for the end of the world. Ra chooses that moment to fall. Vlad says, good, you've brought Ra. Apophis will be hungry when he wakes. Horus speaks in Carter's head. He warns him to take back the crook and flail before it's too late. But Carter can't. They don't belong to him. Vlad taunts Carter. Time for a rematch. And this time their dwarf babysitter isn't here to save them. Carter sees red. He summons his falcon avatar form, but instead of being encased in it this time, Carter actually grows, turning into a 15-foot-tall, falcon-headed warrior. Vlad goes to attack Carter, but Sadie throws her staff, and it transforms into a giant kite. It pushes Vlad and his demon army back. Sadie tells Carter to cover her. She needs to start the last spell. Vlad laughs. They won't succeed. There's a scarab on this shore, surrounded by the other shells, the last bit of Ra's soul. And once he crushes it, Apophis will be reborn. And it won't matter if they fully awaken Ra. He'll still be too weak. Sadie says if that happens, then they will all die, even Vlad. Vlad laughs. Not if he's a host, the host of Apophis, and he will live forever. Sadie says surely he's not serious. He has to be crazy. Then another boat approaches the shore, and a glowing light appears, and a voice says, you're toying with things worse than death, Vlad. Pray I kill you before that happens. And Disjardin steps ashore. Vlad laughs. Has he looked at himself? Vlad's spell has been zapping his power for months now. He's nearly dead. He can't stop him. Vlad is the most powerful magician in the world now. This doesn't stop Disjardin. He vows he's failed many things, but he won't fail this. When Disjardin steps forward, the demon army attacks. Vlad tells Carter and Sadie to think. Disjardin has always been their enemy. Destroy him now, Apophis will rise no matter what they do. The world is broken. Join him and Vlad will cure Walt. This makes Sadie hesitate. But as Sadie looks closer at Vlad, she notices something. Something in his eyes. It's not Vlad speaking, he's being controlled by Apophis. And Vlad's eyes say something else. Kill me, please. Sadie says sorry, the world may be broken, but they can't let chaos win. And then Sadie begins the spell. And Vlad orders his monster army to attack. He aims a spell of green fire at Sadie, and her kite deflects it. Disjardin then charges Vlad. They lift into the air in a tornado, summoned by Disjardin, exchanging blows back and forth. Carter turns when he hears Ra scream, "Vegetable!" Ra has been cornered on the sunboat by a demon. Carter summons a spear and throws it, impaling the demon. Sadie finishes the spell, and a single scarab beetle floats out of the shells and lands in Sadie's hand. Then Vlad gains the upper hand on Disjardin and sends him flying into the sunboat. The chief lector lays still. Vlad lands and tells Sadie, brilliant job. He tells her to hand it over, and he will let her and Carter live. Carter picks up his shovel and sneaks up behind him. Sadie sends her kite to distract him. Vlad quickly disposes of the bird, but it bought Carter enough time. Carter hits him upside the head. His body falls. Carter stomps on him, burying him in the sand. Sadie then summons fire and melts the sand, creating a coffin. The surviving demons flee. However, the chaos energy has gotten to both Carter and Sadie. They don't have much time. Carter tells Sadie to get the scarab and run. Sadie runs for the boat, but she doesn't even make it halfway when Vlad blows up the coffin. The spell knocks Carter back. He shrinks back to his regular form. Vlad laughs, but it's not his voice anymore, it's Apophis's. Apophis looks for Sadie, but she's nowhere to be seen. Apophis says no matter, he'll deal with Ra first and climbs onto the sunboat. Carter tries to get up, but he can't. Apophis greets Ra and Ra responds with weasel cookies. Strangely enough, this may have just saved the world, as the strange words distracted Apophis long enough for Disjardin to launch his attack. He pushes Apophis onto the burning throne. They struggle back and forth, Disjardin summoning Mott, and Apophis canceling it with chaos hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphs burning around them. Carter struggles to his feet. He knows he should help, but he needs to find Sadie. He goes to the last place he remembers seeing her and starts to dig. Carter finds Sadie and pulls her from the sand. She coughs, and Carter wraps his sister in a hug. ReadRiordan then blasts Apophis off the boat, and he lands in the sand 40 feet from Carter and Sadie. ReadRiordan stumbles off the boat, holding a ceramic statue, a shop tea of Apophis. Sadie gasps. He's trying to exorcise Apophis. The energy will kill him. ReadRiordan does the spell. Apophis throws every spell he can at the chief lector, but it does nothing. Then ReadRiordan smashes the shop tea under his foot, and the body of Vlad explodes, and a red snake is released. Then the snake is pulled into a vortex. Carter and Sadie grab the chief lector and manage to make it to the boat. The servants get it moving, but ReadRiordan is dying. He tells them the execration won't last. But he did buy them some time. He tells them they were right. The only thing that can save the world now is the old way, the path of the gods. They need to tell Amos what happened to him and show him this. ReadRiordan removes his leopard skin cape, the cape of the chief lector, and hands it to Carter. And then he passes away. Carter asks Sadie if she still has the scarab beetle. Sadie pulls it out and offers it to Ra. Ra says, no bugs. Sadie says, yes bugs, this is your soul, you need it, and then hands it to him. Ra looks at it and then eats it. Sadie gasps, was he supposed to do that? Apparently not, because nothing happens. Carter and Sadie slump. The boat continues to rise through the Duat, but Carter and Sadie don't feel too good. Their insides feel like they are melting. They have chaos poisoning. Carter tells Sadie they just need to hold on. They do, and eventually the boat gets closer to the mortal world. They start to feel better. They exit in Brooklyn, and Brooklyn House is under attack. They steer the boat towards the battle. As they get closer, they see Freak flying around the house, eating flying snakes. Zia and Walt guard the stairwell from demons and enemy magicians. As the boat gets nearer, Ra leans over the edge and screams, help, zebras! Naturally, this stops the battle as everyone gawks, giving Carter and Sadie enough time to join the battle and start attacking. They meet up with Zia and Walt, who explains that they've been trying to breach all night. They've been holding them back. Ra greets them as well, calling Zia Zebra and Walt Weasel. Zia asks if that's Ra, and Carter and Sadie respond with a yup. Then there's a loud boom. The enemy has breached the walls. Walt tells them to hurry. They go inside to find Bast with her knives, Felix unleashing an army of penguins, and Khufu choking a demon. And most surprisingly of all, Jazz was with them fighting, up and evidently feeling much better. Carter and Sadie join in, Sadie calling upon the power of Isis, summoning rainbow wings and vaporizing a horde of demons. With the demons gone, that leaves just the enemy magicians. Sadie tells them that they are not enemies, and tells them about their journey into the Duat. A man calls them a liar, but Carter says it's the truth. He then brings out the cloak of the chief lector, and tells them how ReadRiordan sacrificed himself. How he said it's time for the path of gods to return. Time for Ra to return. And then the sunboat returns, with Ra, Zia, and Walt, who Ra refused to leave the side of. Boss gasps and bows. The boat begins to glow, and Boss tells Zia and Walt to jump off. Boss says Ra is returning to the heavens. Boss jumps on the boat and says she'll be back, and then the boat with Ra rises into the sky. Amos turns to the magicians and asks who will join them. Some do, but some don't, saying never. They summon an escape portal and say they will never follow Amos. When they leave, Carter asks what did they mean by follow Amos? Amos takes the cape and says with ReadRiordan and Vlad dead, the chief lector position would go to the next most powerful magician alive. And that's him. Amos takes the cloak and puts it on. He's the new chief lector. Later on, after all the chaos, everyone works to fix up Brooklyn House. Zia and Amos leave for the first gnome. Amos tells them to stay safe. Carter and Sadie have grown so much and become so powerful, they don't need him anymore, but he'll keep in touch if they do. Right now, he has to work on sorting out the House of Life. Zia also tells Carter that they'll talk soon and then joins Amos. Later on, at sunset, Bast returns. Carter asks if Ra is okay. Bast says he's the same, but she did steer the boat to the Palace of the Gods, and he's getting ready for his journey tonight. Bast says they should see him before he leaves. Sadie asks how, and then a portal opens up and Anubis walks through. Sadie asks where he's been, and Anubis says a side project, but that's for another time. They should hurry, and then he gestures for them to enter the portal. They enter the throne room of the gods, and in the center of the room is the sunboat. Horus greets them. The other gods bow as well, but Sadie can tell there's hostility there. Not all the gods are happy to see them. Horus tells Carter he has his support. He can call on his power whenever he wants. He will fight with him until Ra is fully revived. They will stand against Apophis. Not everyone feels the same, including Isis. Anubis apologizes. Sometimes gods are slower to accept change. Boss then tells them they have one last stop to make. They enter Sunny Acres. There's a new patient, Bess. He sits in a chair motionless with drool dripping out of his mouth. Tuaret tries to get him to drink some water. When Tuaret spots them, there's anger in her eyes. Tuaret storms Boss and tells her this is all her fault. She took advantage of him, used him like one of her cat toys, and he deserved better than Boss. Better than this. Sadie speaks up. She'll fix this. No matter what, she will find a way to revive Bess. She then kisses Bess's forehead and returns home, crying the whole way. Later, Sadie sits on her bed thinking about all that's changed, all that's happened, when there's a knock on the door. Walt enters. He tells Sadie that no matter what happens, he's glad to have met Sadie. This makes Sadie cry. She failed. Walt is dying. Bess is lost. The House of Life doesn't trust them, and Apophis will be back. Walt tells her she didn't fail. She's given everyone hope, and she's amazing. And she should send out another recording. Magicians will listen to what she has to say. With that, Walt leaves. And as he does, Carter enters holding a book. Sadie asks what it is, and Carter tells her he never got a chance to give her her birthday present. It's their mom's old college textbook, the one she would read to them when they were children. Sadie hugs him and tells him it's amazing. He's an amazing brother. Together, they look through it and reminisce. And Sadie thinks about Walt said. She turns to Carter. They have work to do. Sadie doesn't know when Apophis will strike next, how to heal Bess, or revive Ra, but one thing she does know, she can't do it alone. They're gonna need to do it together. But to see how they do it, we'll have to wait till next time with The Serpent's Shadow. But let me know what you thought about the Throne of Fire down in the comments below. And until next time, I'm signing off. And please, as always, stay safe